Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when we do it ourselves. For this week's episode, I had the opportunity to speak with another host on Be the Change Media Network, and she's been creating a podcast that might seem a little different from some of our other shows. Sandra Martyna Rowińska is the host of Formula Amateur, which is your podcasting destination to learn everything you need to know about Formula One racing from another amateur. From the history of the sport to the current racing setup and all of the significant details which make every race spectacular and unique, Sandra covers it all, and I'm so excited to share this conversation with her now. So without further ado, let's get started with this episode featuring Sandra Martyna Rowińska.
Hi, my name's Sandra, and I am the host of Formula Amateur. I'm 26 years old, and I got obsessed with Formula One uh, during the time where I was supposed to be writing my dissertation. I got distracted. I was looking for something to get distracted by, and I found this series on Netflix called Drive to Survive. I already knew a lot about Formula One because my brother used to watch it a lot. He always liked it, and I never got into it then. But then when I realized that they have a show about Formula One, which is a documentary, and it comes out every year, and you sort of get to know the more personable side of things from the drivers and the team's perspective, that really excited me and that really interested me. And as I was sort of refreshing my mind and understanding it now that I'm a lot older, because when I first watched Formula One, I was maybe like 7 or 8. W- I was interested in, learning as much as possible. And then I thought to myself, because I tried to sort of explain to my parents what I've learned, how I got interested into this. And then I thought, this would make a great idea for a podcast. Like, I watch a lot of Formula One podcasts anyway, but they all sort of have this assumption that you know a little bit about Formula One already, and you're just updating yourself on the news about Formula One. Whereas I wanted to just be there, like, if someone is coming in not knowing anything at all about Formula One, but they want to learn, they're keen to learn, how can they learn about it? But also stay up to date with what's going on so they don't feel like they're left behind.
That's amazing, and I do think that's kind of where the Be the Change network side of things as well comes in, because I think that it's so cool that you are breaking down this sport that has gotten so much hype because of Netflix, I think, which we can also chat a little bit about that. But I think F1 has gotten so much hype, but as far as kind of boiling it down to the basics and understanding the way that the races work and stuff, I think that your podcast is a great resource for people, which is amazing. Give me kind of like a crash course on your podcast. You've been doing it for a while, so kind of give me the background story of when you started it, maybe how things have changed, but tell me a little bit about how you organize your podcast, what the shows are like, how often you do it. So, as if I'd never listened to your podcast, tell me the whole story.
Yeah, so it depends on the week. I make at least one episode a week on Saturdays where I talk about a certain topic. For example, last week on Saturday, I spoke about the Formula 2 racing, which is the junior formula just below Formula 1, which typically that's how drivers, that's the last step before you get into Formula 1. But there are several different ways that you can get into it, but that's primarily how people join through there. And so on the Saturdays, I pick a topic that I feel is interesting and also deserves perhaps a bit of a spotlight. I'm currently working on some projects, so by the time that this goes out, it will already be out about Formula 3. So I'll be talking about the race rundown of that. So I will talk through all the races that have happened so far, or the sprint races, or the main races, how this affects where the drivers stand, because the more points you get, the more impressive you look. So you teams along the chain. So, if you're impressive in the Formula 3, they might take you up to Formula 2. And if you're aggressive in Formula 2 and a space frees up in Formula 1, you get to go into Formula 1. So Saturday is sort of like an educational day, whereas on Mondays, if it's a Monday following a race, I talk about what race happened. So up until last week, every single episode was just about Formula One and the results there. So I would go through the first practice and the second practice, which happened on the Friday. I would go through the first practice three, which is on Saturday, typically morning, and then qualify, which is also on Saturday, and then the race on Sunday. But now, one of my projects is to add all of the formulas that travel around with Formula One. So I included Formula Two. So I started off talking about how the race went for the Formula Two drivers, their practice session, their qualifying session, and the two races. Also, just sort of thrown back to the Saturday episode to sort of mention, like, oh, by the way, for the sprint race, wherever the top 10 drivers qualified, it gets flipped. And then in the main race, it's as they qualified. I want to cover as much as I can. So I'll be talking also about Formula 3 and F1 Academy, because I feel like they also deserve the same spotlight level as Formula 1, because these are the future drivers of Formula 1, and it sort of shows them progressing. And, you can't just expect someone to uh, just start off in Formula 1. You have to work your way up, and I feel like it's important to show that, for people to understand that it takes growth and you need support. And it's also important to show that, you're interested there, and you're interested in their careers as they progress, rather than just being, just acknowledging a driver once they make it to the pinnacle. You want to show that you care about them wherever they are. I wish I could cover karting, for example, and things like that, but there's so many different karting organizations and things like that. Whereas, I want to focus from F1 Academy and Formula 3 onwards, as that's where it gets a little bit more competitive, and the chain starts working from there, and it sort of narrows down the best of the best as they get on with their careers. So yeah, Monday episodes are for talking about the race results, and I want to cover more and more races, all of those, as I mentioned, formula races. And then Saturdays are for learning about something new to do with motorsport, particularly with Formula One, but a lot of it also applies to Formula Two, Formula Three, and F1 Academy.
That was such a great overview, and I'm going to link all of the links to your podcast in the description of this so people can check it out after that promo. So I think it's amazing that you have created this platform, like you said, where you're kind of breaking down these different formulas for people and the way that, F1 works kind of just beyond what we see often on, maybe TV or the Netflix show. I do want to talk a little bit about the Netflix show as someone who does know Formula One much better than me. I will say, because I'm a Formula One fan because of Netflix. I feel like I'm a very like bandwagon. I love the drama. I love to see the kind of insides and outs of the drivers' lives and stuff. But what effect do you think that the Netflix shows have had on Formula One as a sport? Now we're seeing Formula Academy coming out on Netflix. And do you think this hype is going to continue? Talk to me a little bit about like the Netflix shows and the impact of Netflix on the sports. I know that's kind of a huge question, but tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the exposure from Netflix has been a very good thing, because before Netflix came in, there wasn't as much attention to what everyone thought of as the pinnacle of motorsport, simply because they thought uh, that, you have to sort of you had to have been brought up liking it, with a whole family history of liking it since it started, and it felt really exclusive. And I feel like Netflix came in and sort of opened it up to people to say, just because your family might have not been into motorsport, or, you don't have to be a descendant of a Formula One driver to want to show interest in this thing. And it gave people more access, and it also gave more personality to the drivers. So before Netflix came in, you just thought, oh, they're just some rich blokes driving in circles for God knows how many laps. But now you see how, for example, Oscar Piastri, he was part of Alpine initially in 2022. He was a reserve, but then there was all the drama surrounding his contract, where Alpine said that they signed him to drive for them, but actually he did not sign a contract, and then went to McLaren, and there was a whole issue of potentially have McLaren stolen Oscar Piastri from Alpine, and all of this. It just sort of it gives you access you never thought you could get. It was very much a us and them situation, and now it just feels like you know who's driving, you know them, you might not know all the ins and outs of their lives, but you know what their attitude is like. For example, with Daniel Ricciardo, everyone was devastated when he left Formula One in after the Singapore race last year, because of the impact that he had on people before the Netflix show started, and when it started as well, because he's just such a lovable character, and we want to see him happy. We want to see him have a great time, and it was just, yeah, it just brings people closer. It makes it feel more real, even though it's such an expensive sport. Like, I heard someone at work say to someone who was also a Formula One fan, that, "Oh, you're not very good at Mario Kart for someone who claims to be a big Formula One fan." Which to that I said, "Well, how do you expect us to know how to drive a car like a Formula One car? It's not the same as football." You can't just buy yourself a Formula One car and take it out on the track. It's a very specific type of machinery. So to make something so exclusive become so inclusive and so loving, and reinvigorate something, I think Liberty Media did something amazing for the sport to make it more human.
I think you're so right, and I do think it's people like me, who I think I never would have thought beyond, I guess, seeing kind of the highlights of races on the news. But then when, you do that human bit, and you're so right about Daniel Ricciardo, I feel like he was everybody's favorite. He's like a golden retriever personified, everybody, like, loved him. So it is just that kind of fan base was built up around the drivers and their personalities, and also, I guess, the team principals and the teams themselves, which leads me very well to my next question. Who is your favorite driver? What is your favorite team? Tell me a little bit about that. That might be a little bit controversial. Tell me about your favorites and why.
Yeah, so two of my favorite drivers don't drive for Formula One. Uh, One anymore, and the other one is trying to return to the grid, and I hope he does. So the one who doesn't drive anymore is Robert Kubica. He's a Polish driver. He also won the 24-hour Le Mans this year. Just because I'm also Polish, and for him to be the only Polish person to have ever driven in Formula One is just, it gives a lot of attention to a country that is either forgotten about, or is sort of seen as, oh, you remember what happened to them a couple of decades ago. I wonder how they've come back from that. And also, he had a massive accident in 2012. He was taking part in a rally, and his car veered off the road, and he almost didn't survive. But he had numerous operations, and then he came back to Formula One in 2019 because he couldn't take part in Formula One after that accident. And he was so close to signing a contract with Ferrari. He took a few years off to get better, and then he returned in 2019 for Williams, and then he was only there briefly because it turns out that it was just too painful for him. physically to carry on, and then he went into other types of racing, for example, world endurance racing. So I just feel like he's an icon in motorsport for my country and for my people. But also the one that's trying to return to the grid, and I hope he does, is Valtteri Bottas. Just because he's such an icon, he's so funny, he's so personable. Like he just feels like a friend. If you watch him on Drive to Survive, when he was in Mercedes, he sort of felt a bit like, you know, closed off, a bit scared, a bit like, oh, I'm not sure what I'm allowed to do or say. You know, he was all very prim and proper, but then as soon as he went into Sauber, he became himself in a way that we just love to see. You know, he had the calendar of his naked backside, and he was raising money for Movember, and uh he's just an icon, and I really hope we see him on the grid again, in any team. Right now, it looks like so he's currently the reserve driver for the Mercedes team, but he might be briefly in Alpine, or he might be in Cadillac next year when they join the grid. But also, yeah, I just want to see him back on the grid because I miss his face, and he's just a wonderful human being, and I hope to get to meet him one day. But in terms of my favorite team, it has to be McLaren because they're just so lovable as well. Like it goes back to again being personable. They just feel so authentic and so friendly, and just they know what to give the people, and the people love it, and they love the people. So it's just I feel that it's just that friendliness and that kinship that brings me to the Papaya Boys.
Oh, yeah, that's so good. So I'm sure you're thrilled right now with the way that the season's going, not to jinx anything. Well, I am, but where we're at now, it's pretty good. So I have one more question for you. Through this work that you've been doing with the podcast, and I think this idea of kind of democratizing F1 for people and allowing people to learn more about the sport without having to do their own research, here providing this easy listen for people to learn more about this sport that's taking the world by storm. And I think that's incredible. But I also think you doing this podcast and being so passionate about this topic, and I think just that passion coming out is so inspiring to me, and I'm sure to other people who are listening to your podcast, because you can really feel how much you care about F1 and how much you love doing this. I think that that makes change for people. I think inspiring people to chase after their passions and to maybe create platforms like this podcast that you've created is incredible. Lots of people want to create change and they might want to make a difference, but they might not know how to get started with that work. What advice would you want to give for those people who may be listening?
So my advice would be sometimes the world is not going to give you the dream that you want to achieve, so you have to make it yourself. When I was growing up, when I was little, I wanted to be a dentist, but I realized I am petrified of blood. So I changed my mind, and actually, through discovering when my auntie and uncle were moving back to Poland, they left a bunch of things behind, and we kept hold of them. And I found a notebook, a highlighter, and a pencil, and I made my first ever like newspaper cover. And it was just something silly that I was doing. And then eventually, I got interested in the idea of journalism, and I wanted to be a journalist. And over time, through work experience with the BBC and numerous things to do with journalism, I had briefly, I owned my own newspaper company at school. When I did journalism for my degree at university, what I wanted to do was focus on politics. So I wanted to get into political journalism, and I wanted to, you know, get to see Strasbourg. I wanted to see Brussels. I wanted to go into the UK Parliament. I wanted to make political change. But when I did my degree, this was a big portion of it was during the pandemic. So I lost my chance at my work experience I had set up, and it never came to fruition. And was sort of left behind, and I was sort of nowhere. and I still wanted to pursue my dream, but I didn't know how to. And then eventually I decided, because there was nobody wanted to hire me without any experience, I decided to do a master's degree in Cardiff University in political communications, and that's how we met. And I was hoping that that would lead me onto a career into political journalism, and I'm still not ruling it out. But along the way, I developed this love for Formula One, and sort of I wanted to tell everyone about my love about it. But I know that quite a few people out there don't know anything about it, so they would be very confused. So I wanted to express my love with the knowledge that I've gained and just be there like, okay, so this is what's happening. This is why it's important, or this is why it's controversial, or this is why it's funny. I wanted to sort of explain my excitement to people and give them access to it. So my advice would be, sometimes when the world tells you no, you can't, you've got to take the bull by the horns and do it yourself, because not everything is promised to you. Sometimes you've got to step out of your comfort zone and just be like, you know what, I'm going to do this because nobody else is letting me, nobody's giving me a chance. I'm going to do it by myself. And luckily, luckily I met you and you gave me this sort of fantastic opportunity. But even if people aren't part of a podcasting network, if they start their own podcast, as long as you find that niche that you're excited about and you want to tell people about it, whether it's to educate or whether it's just to find someone who can share that passion with you. If you love something, it's not a job, it's a career. That's the difference between a job and a career, is the love that you have for something versus something that you have to do. And I think the most important thing is to find what you love, and if the world won't give it to you, you've got to step out there and make yourself known and do it yourself. It may take a while, it won't be easy. You have to persevere and you'll get there. I'm still very much like, even though I've been doing this for a while now, I'm still, taking tiny little steps. And every single time I make an episode, even if someone might not notice that I made a little difference, I always want to make some sort of a difference between episodes. At least that I know that I made some sort of a difference there, because I want to develop, I want to evolve, I want to make it even greater, even more like exploring the topic. I want to share that passion. I want to constantly improve. And I feel like, yeah, it's sometimes you have to take that big step, and it might take a while until you see the fruits of your labor. But if you don't start, you won't know what it is. And yeah, sometimes there aren't opportunities available to you, but if there's a way that you can do it yourself in a reasonable way, why not? As long as it's legal, why not?
I really enjoyed talking with Sandra, and if you haven't checked out Formula Amateur, I would definitely recommend it. I do want to close out this episode by highlighting some of that last advice that Sandra shared about what to do when life doesn't always present opportunities. I love how Sandra talked about the importance of not waiting for opportunities to come to you, but instead going out and getting them, which Sandra did, of course, with Formula Amateur when she reached out to me to get started with this podcast. So, as you head off to listen to Formula Amateur, I want you to keep in mind that life won't always present opportunities to you, but change comes when we do it ourselves. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Sandra on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I included those links in the description of this episode, as well as the links to listen to Formula Amateur. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be The Change Media Network. I'm working on expanding Be The Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests and incredible hosts like Sandra. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.